Hey Jess, welcome to the show.
Hi, Brittany. So happy to be here finally after listening to so many episodes. Here we are.
It is kind of funny having like your friend and business partner as the guest. I'm like, hey.
That happened eventually. So here we are.
All the back end metrics of how the podcast is doing. Like, you know, a lot more than most guests do coming in.
I know all the secrets.
There's no secrets on this show. I'm incapable of having any secrets on this show.
That's true.
Well, I am really excited for our listeners to learn more about you because you are going to be ever more and more present in the FemTech community, in FemTech Focuses, community, and then Coyote Ventures. So I'm really excited for us to just learn about you. Our listeners know a lot about me, so I hope they learn more about you today. And then we can introduce Coyote, which I know we are so excited about.
Yes.
Cool. Well, let's kick off the interview with talking about your background. Where are you from? What did you study? And then, how did you discover FemTech? How'd you end up here? Don't worry if it's a long answer. We want the long answer.
Yeah, it's very long, but sure. Yeah, so I'm originally from Amarillo, Texas. It's in West Texas and a small city. So just was born and raised there, and I went to college in Texas. And I guess like in high school, I was around the medical profession a lot. So my mom was an OB-GYN nurse. I was really interested in that area. And I actually worked there one summer, following around the doctors. It was always like, I was always trying to go see a delivery. I actually never did. And I also worked in my dad's dentist office starting at age 14. So really was around a lot of medical professions. I don't think I told you this, but I think I was talking to a dentist the other day or something, and I was saying that I actually was like pre-med and I was obsessed with surgery. So I actually helped assist my dad in oral surgeries sometimes. Sometimes they were like, because Amarillo's a small town, I knew a lot of the patients. And so the first time I did it was like one of my friends who was in my grade. I was literally helping with the surgery.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So when I went to college, I was pre-med. I was a bio major. I didn't, with bio, I felt like it was a lot of memorization. So when I took my first chemistry class, I was really fortunate. I had an amazing professor, and I just felt like I really understood how things worked with chemistry. And maybe I just didn't have as good of professors with bio, but I just was like, oh, sometimes our homework was literally like coloring in pictures of like what the body parts are. And I was like, this is just kind of memorization. So I changed my major to biochem, and even though I was still interested in like medical profession, I started doing a lot of research, and I enjoyed sort of like the discovery process within research. However much you can enjoy pipetting, I didn't, sometimes I was over that part, but and then I also double majored in philosophy. I just was really interested in a lot of the topics of philosophy. So I thought it was a cool balance. I really liked our philosophy department. It was really small. Our classes, we would just maybe 15 people per class sit around a table and discuss topics. And so one class I took was environmental ethics, and that taught me about sustainability and food, which ties in later. Being from Amarillo, there's lots of factory farming, and so I've kind of opened my eyes up to a lot of the sustainability.
College were you at? What college were you at?
Texas State in San Marcos.
St. Marcos. Okay, cool. And to major in philosophy, like people literally go to college just to major in philosophy. You went and you majored in biochem and philosophy. Like that sounds like a lot of coursework and a lot of essay writing and a lot of experiments. Like, were you like the only scientist philosopher in your classes?
Yeah, I was. So it kind of was an interesting bridge that I could cross when the scientists had a philosophy question or vice versa. There was also a philosophy of science class that I took. That was really interesting. And so I was definitely the go-to person there.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, and Texas State was a really good school. It has a reputation for being a party school. But it's near Austin and San Antonio. There's a river, so lots of like great outdoors activities, and I really liked it there. And
Amazing.
then I did undergrad research at Berkeley one summer, so it's called Amgen Scholars Program, and that definitely like catapulted me into like higher like research projects, and did a nice publication that summer, and definitely after that was pretty set on going to grad school for biochem, rather than trying to go through the whole medical school route. So I'm really thankful for that program that I did with Amgen.
Yeah. And Jess, when you were at Berkeley that one summer, did you feel the like entrepreneurship spirit around you, or were you like really in the lab the whole time? You didn't really get the Silicon Valley stuff?
I didn't really get that much Silicon Valley stuff, but Ann Wojcicki from 23andMe gave a talk, and that was like in the somewhat early days of that company, which just went public the other day, which is cool. So I saw her give a talk, so I was a little bit like, oh, there's interesting applications of research, but definitely was still majorly in the academic research bubble. Yeah.
Cool. So then what happens? Do you where you go to grad school?
UC San Diego. Which was it's a really great school, lots of great research. So I was in the chemistry department. And I was in a lab where we studied like the microbiome and the communications that happen in ecosystems, using mass spectrometry. So we were developing methods for mass spec imaging. That was a really great lab. And basically after I finished enough coursework for my master's, and I did one defense, it wasn't the candidacy defense, but it was kind of a milestone. And I looked around and I said, okay, I could stay here, work 80 hours a week in the lab for the next like 6 years, or I could go apply this research somewhere, like at a company. And so I made the decision to leave with a master's, after talking to a lot of wiser folks than myself, including my PI, who was really like helpful and encouraging, because I know a lot of PIs will just like, they're like, you must suffer, and people get really depressed. And so really thankful that my PI had a good relationship to sort of facilitate that decision. But I didn't know quite where I would go. I definitely loved the Bay Area, so I was interested in ending up here long term, but I did a few internships. I actually worked at a winery for a few months. And then I worked at the Smithsonian for a few months. And so the Smithsonian was research-based, though. It was mass spec to figure out how old some artifacts were. It was sort of method development for that.
Cool.
Yeah, and then I was thinking about moving to New York, so I did a yoga teacher training in New York. I was thinking about, food science, actually. I looked at Cornell. And then one day I just got an email from Impossible Foods, which was back then called Sandhill Foods. And it was like, we are a disruptive technology. And I was just like, I don't know what disruptive technology is, but it doesn't sound good, But obviously I had no idea. And but yeah, I was like, oh, I see what they're doing. It sounds really interesting. It was like very small startup seed stage. I also had learned then what a seed stage was.
Yeah.
So yeah, I moved back out here. That was 2012. There was 12 employees, and joined the R&D team.
Oh my gosh. Sandhill Foods, is that what it was called?
Yeah, how there's like a lot of VCs on Sandhill Road. I guess that's why they named it that, but we had several name changes over the years.
Well, this is a really exciting part of your story for me, and I know it's going to be for the listeners too. What was it like being an early employee at a company that was, now people are going to be like, oh my God, I just had their sausages, or I just had their ground beef or whatever, right? So Tell us, what was it like working in a laboratory early stage? And I would love for you to, tell us specifically your role, because I think it's so fun to think about working at a startup and wearing a lot of hats.
Yeah, that's definitely a takeaway, is like wearing a lot of hats. So in the beginning, when it was really small, there were no sub teams. It was just like, this is the R&D team. And like, we would just kind of bounce our projects around. So one of my first projects was like using proteins to emulsify fat, because like fat is really important in meat. And so literally, this might be inappropriate, but it was like I would form the fat balls. And so we called them fat balls. And I was like cooking them and characterizing how they cooked, basically. And I called myself the fat lady. I know there's a lot of like, this is maybe a rated R podcast, so I'm on it, but that was one of my first projects. I helped develop like the first prototype. It was like, looked like a piece of poop, to be honest. It was really bad. And so back then there was like not very many. Now there's all types of like, here's all these options for vegetable proteins, since it's such a big area now. Yeah. But back then, Beyond Meat hadn't launched either. So it was like, we are kind of processing everything ourselves, which ended up being like, now there's other sort of ingredient suppliers. But when we tried to do a lot of that ourselves, it was kind of a failure. But really fun. Like actually my very first day, they were like, don't dress nice because we're actually going to go out and harvest some plants. And so literally my first day, I was like, okay, I'll wear yoga pants today, which I ended up wearing yoga pants every day for like the next 4 years. But we went out and it was like a little tiny airport with a field on Half Moon Bay, which is right on the ocean. And then we were just like harvesting plants and took them back to the lab for analysis. And we were working till like 10 p.m. that night. So I remember being like, is this a normal day? I had no idea. Yeah, and then like a few weeks later, we took a trip to like South Texas, again, like harvesting plants, and pretty crazy times. And like our business guy Nick rolled up to harvest plants, and he was like, yeah, I just had a meeting with Bill Gates, because he was one of our early funders. So it was kind of interesting contrast to him like fundraising from like big shots and then coming out and like he had a actual background working in farms as well. So it was like pretty funny.
Wow, this is so cool. So you worked there for 4 years, and I'm assuming over those 4 years, the company really kind of started to take off. What were some of the big milestones that happened while you were there? And what was the point that you decided that you wanted to do something else?
Yeah, a lot of over the years, obviously the team grew. I became a founding member of the flavor team. So we helped develop the flavors. We were actually using mass spec for analytics, and I was cross-functional with prototyping and sensory. So it was very collaborative. We worked with some really great chefs as well. And yeah, I mean, the biggest milestone I would say was the launch. Really fun and exciting, like seeing all the efforts. It was about 5 years from inception to the public launch. So yeah, and then after the launch, like a lot of sort of final iterations as the scale up was being built out. And then, yeah, at that point I'd been there for 4 years. It became like very much scale up focus. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I was just like, well, I seem to see a lot of other things happening. But I felt like, yeah, that was kind of being in a bubble because you're very focused on solving all the problems that come up every day. So I decided to go to business school. So I sort of take a step back, figure out like what else that I want to work on. So yeah, I stayed in San Francisco. There's a school called Presidio Graduate School. It's really small. It's just, they only have MBA and MPA for public administration, but it's like impact and sustainability focus. So like the very first thing we learned about is like systems thinking and impact. So yeah, it was a really good school with people kind of like all types of different sort of impacts that they want to make.
Mm-hmm. I just want to ask you, like, what happened next? Like, and then what? And then what?
Yeah.
This story's so
I
exciting.
know I have such a long story, but yeah, it all builds up to
Yep.
Coyote, basically. So I started consulting. I really liked the early stage of startups, and there were so many startups happening in food tech. So it wasn't hard for me to find clients. It was kind of hard to work with so many like idea or seed stage because they don't have good funding. So as a consultant, that's something that I always sort of like advise people to think about. It's like, how are you going to get paid, or like how low can you go to help them? Because, you know, affordable pricing can have a positive impact on some of these startups. So yeah, getting equity is also an option, but I did that for a while. I was definitely considered my thesis like science-based products with positive impact. And so I was looking for sort of like beyond food tech, but I hadn't seen women's health as like a business opportunity quite yet. But I was also interested in venture capital. A lot of the companies I worked with were raising, and I just was like, well, a lot of these VCs seem like they come from banking or come from like, you know, something like non-operating roles. And I was like, I have so many more insights than you know, or additional insights that are like a different perspective. So I started working in venture, and it was Adrian Grenier's fund. So he really cares about a few impact focused, including sustainability and gender equality. So he was raised by his mom, who was like a single mom, and she's like a big feminist. So he really wanted to make investments to impact gender equality. And so when I was working there, I started looking at some deals in sexual wellness, which I think really ties in with gender equality. And became obsessed with that area as well as women's health. I think some of the first ones I saw were more fertility related, but opened up my eyes into this area. And yeah, if it was up to me, I wouldn't have looked at any other areas, which is now what I'm doing. So.
And so you came across some of these sexual wellness companies. You're working at this family office venture fund. You know, what was the thing about these sexual wellness companies that you were like, this is what I need to do? Like, you know, did you feel the same way about like the food science, or this was like a totally different passion that was sparked?
It was a totally new passion that was sparked. I feel like I liked, you know, I think after a while I was not inspired by the food science because it was, a lot of people are just like, we are the impossible of XYZ. And I was just like, please never say that to me ever again. Like, it makes me cringe. Just like, that is not a good pitch to get me interested at all. So I don't know. Yeah, it's like a lot of people come into women's health from personal experiences. And so I did have a personal experience related to sexual wellness where I was very marginalized by someone that I was dating. And he was a very intelligent individual, but super ignorant of like women's needs. And I was just like, how is this such a big problem? And so I actually, like, from that personal experience, started researching a lot, and that definitely coincided with the venture fund. It happened like around the same time. And the co-GP that I was working with then, she and Adrian Grenier were the GPs. She did a lot of deals in sexual wellness. And so like some of her insights were helpful for me to learn about the space.
Mm-hmm. When did you find FemTech?
When I was doing that research, it was like sort of like sexual wellness led into the FemTech, but then I realized I had seen some around, but I didn't know it was like its own area. So yeah, I saw a lot of companies out at Indie Bio. I'm pretty close with that group. And so I have kind of remembered back like, oh yeah, there's that fertility one, like all that time ago. And like, yeah, it stuck out in my mind that I was like, this is an interesting area, but I didn't know it was like, I don't know. I thought it was lumped in with like biotech.
Yeah,
or something.
totally. Yeah. Totally. And it was forever, right? Like the word FemTech was coined in 2016. And it's, I mean, there's a lot of debate right now whether the FemTech word is the right word. Should we even have a word? Why can't we just call it health tech? And it's, you know, it's all based on this idea that females have historically and systemically been excluded. And so we needed a word to start a movement, to start to say, listen, things were made for men, and then they were either not made smaller for women. Women just had to deal with bigger sizes or the wrong size, or they were made small and pink. And women are not just little men, as I like to say on the show. And so, I'm not surprised you became obsessed with FemTech. It's the best. So did I. And I was thinking, how can I, make investments in this space, and I had an idea for FemTech angels, like we were going to get angel investors together, make investments, thinking about starting a fund. I even had a little pitch deck, like put together.
Yeah, I saw it eventually.
I was missing a team slide because I knew that like I couldn't do it by myself, and I didn't have all the skill sets. I didn't have as much investment experience as I thought I should have to run a fund. And it was so awesome growing my relationship with you over the last year, until one day we scheduled a phone call and you were like, hey, I'm going to send you a deck for my venture fund idea. And it's called Coyote Ventures. It was called Coyote at that time, right?
Yeah, I came up with that name just sort of, but it was kind of interesting. It was like after Women Who Run with the Wolves, which I told you about. And then I was like, I'm open to changing it. We can brainstorm, but then we never came up with any other idea. And everybody's just like, that's such a good name. And like, even our lawyer, like, I work with you because I love coyotes. So yeah, then it really stuck.
It was such a cool experience exchanging pitch decks with you and being like, oh my God, we're each other's business partner. We've been looking for each other. Like,
I know. So they were basically the same pitch deck. Like, we came up with a different number that was a little more in the middle. I think I came up with lower fund size and yours was bigger. So we're like, 10 million seems like the right number.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And so actually, you and I, we've talked about why Coyote, but, our listeners, I bet, are curious. Why are we calling our fund Coyote Ventures? And then after you tell us that story, can you give us a thesis?
Yes. So the name came about from Women Who Run with the Wolves. It's a classic book that's sort of like the myths of wild woman archetype. And wild woman doesn't mean like crazy running around naked and like making everybody uncomfortable. It's sort of like a woman who's intuitive and healthy and sort of like, humans came from nature, and it's sort of like, thinking a little bit more about being natural in that way. So it's hard to sort of explain what it all means. So everybody should just go read that book. And yes, no problem if it takes you like over a year to read it, because it's pretty dense. So that was like the first sort of coyote. And then I knew that coyote was like a Native American's, I guess, symbolic animal. And they're like adaptive, and like in Native American mythology, I guess they're like the trickster, but not just like tricking you in the bad way. It's sometimes like they see a coyote and it's like a sign that you should pay attention and you might like learn something new. And then when we ask people, both you and I were like, what does coyote mean to you? People were sometimes like, yeah, they're really amazing animals. They're adaptive. They can live like in any environment. They also live with humans. So even though humans like try to sort of get rid of them, they know how to stick around. They have different sort of personalities. Some of them are empaths, some of them are introverted. So there's a lot of like really cool things about coyotes as animals. There's a lot of coyotes around the Bay Area. I don't know about Raleigh, but they're pretty local out here.
Oh my gosh. And then you and I have little dogs that almost look like little baby coyotes.
Yeah, so my dog howls like a little coyote. So
gosh, I love it. So what is, and I could pitch this too, but you are featured here. So why don't you give us the pitch? What is Coyote Ventures investing in, and tell us more about the fund?
We're investing in early stage companies innovating in women's health and wellness. So our fund is $10 million, and we'll focus primarily on seed stage companies. So the main idea is to invest at that seed stage, and Brittany and I have sort of like unique experience having fundraised as well as launching products. And so we see ourselves as that partner to help sort of like get from seed to Series A. That said, we're definitely looking at a few companies outside of that seed stage, just because they're such amazing companies and we want to support them as well. And yeah, so I think bringing in both of our expertise in different sectors, and so like biotech, consumer products, apps, diagnostics, and digital health, lots of different industries that FemTech can span. And I personally don't know very much about therapeutics and medical devices that are highly regulated. So we said, I don't know if that would really fit our thesis. So we opted out of that area. But there's other co-investors who are looking at those spaces.
Yes. What are some areas and like companies that you're really excited about? You can either give us like specific names of companies, but also like, is there, you're like, here's a problem, I'm looking for a solution. If you have it, email it to me kind of thing.
Yeah, I think I have both. So I think some of the companies that we are investing in, I really love Weil because they have a vision to be a lifestyle brand, but they're also really science driven. And it's a lot of plant-based solutions. And I like that it incorporates sort of like traditional herbs as well as like science. So yeah, they're looking to help mitigate symptoms that you experience like perimenopause and menopause. So I really like that company a lot. I love basically how I said earlier, like science-driven products that have an impact, which all of FemTech has an impact, but I think I really like the consumer spaces. I think I understand them the best. And then what else that we're looking for, I would say, I think we agree that there's a lot of underserved areas in women's health. Like it's all underserved overall, but I think the things that are like, maybe there's underserved areas that are, so let's see, I think there's areas where there's a lot of saturation, I guess, which are like sort of menstruation. Like, so if you invented a new tampon, like we're happy to look at it, but it also might, how much market share could you really take away from Tampax is like one of the questions. Whereas something like abortion, there's only like 4 startups or so that we know of, whereas like 1 in 4 women experience an abortion. So I think that some of those like big areas for opportunity are where we're looking a little bit more.
Totally. Do you see yourself like investing in women's health forever? Like are you like, this is it? Like I'm here, like this is what
well, I spent so much of that time after I left Impossible, basically 2016, being like, what am I supposed to do with my life? I have so much passion, but I need to find my place and my people. And like, now I'm like, think I found it. I'm happy to do this the rest of my life.
Yes, I feel the same way because it's just so meaningful. I love working hard on something that I know is like literally, we are going to invest in things that save women's lives.
Mm-hmm.
Even if we're not doing therapeutics, we're still investing in things that are literally at the end of the day, improving women's quality of life, saving their lives. And so it's just so awesome.
Yeah, big time. And like, even like, yes, saving lives. And also like so many of the messages that we send within that of like, it's okay to talk about your period. It's okay to talk about sex. It's okay, to recognize these, whatever is a problem. So, or just something that you want to talk about. So I think it's also sort of an issue like gender equality and the patriarchy. And it's kind of deep. It's like, yes, saving lives and so much more too.
And so much more too. Absolutely. Last question about the fund. So you and I, we're starting this fund. I'm a previous startup founder. You were an early employee at a company that you were pulling up crops and leading departments of food science and stuff. what are some ways that Coyote Ventures is going to treat our portfolio founders a little differently? It's like, what's a typical investment fund, operations and how they treat their founders versus how we envision doing that?
I'm glad you asked, because I think it's really important differentiator in our fund, especially investing in women's health. We want us all to be very healthy, take care of our physical, mental, spiritual well-being. And we definitely foresee supporting our founders, especially 80% of FemTech founders are women. A lot of our founders are of childbearing age, so supporting them in that journey. And, lots of traditional VCs will not, they, dismiss women overall, but especially pregnant, or, there's like ageism as well. So if they're like a certain age, they'll be like, it's just really tricky. So we actually want to eventually have founder retreats, go somewhere super beautiful where we can, be inspired and connect. And I think in some ways, a lot of the good work will be done when we're not working as hard, expected to like eat a sad desk lunch and all that. We can eat fresh like coconuts off a tree or wherever we end up, and connect, and also take care of ourselves.
Yes, I love it. I love it. I love it. I cannot wait for our first founder retreat. It's going to be so amazing. Literally, when we're due diligencing companies, in my mind, I'm like, do I see myself spending the weekend on the beach with this founder? Like it's actually a due diligence question in my mind.
We kind of just like, do you think they would even want to go on the retreat? And then we kind of were like, I'm not sure. We're kind
of like, yeah. Oh, Jess, I love it. Well, we have two last questions that our listeners really love. You're an avid listener yourself, so you know what's coming. The first one is, if someone wanted to start a FemTech company, what's an area in women's health and wellness that still needs innovating?
Well, I know what everyone else says usually, which is like every area. But since I had the advantage of knowing that you would ask that, I thought of maybe one example. I think a lot of the FemTech founders and operators will sympathize that advertising is really difficult. And so I was thinking about it, that, some sort of marketplaces that could also give companies like an early in terms of like, maybe there's a new FemTech company that's like launching D2C. It costs so much to launch that yourself. So potentially more sort of either opportunities for them to sell on a marketplace, or even like depending on someone's skill set, they could also help them sort of as an accelerator, or more support around sort of like get that early stage though. But I was thinking marketplaces specifically, it would be really cool. And yeah, there's a few that have their own sort of like starting areas, but there's not a ton just for like, here's my, like if I just said, I have this like women's health thing, like I just like Google it, or now I have this whole community to ask, but I think the average person wouldn't know exactly where to start if they were looking to solve any general women's health issue.
Yeah, totally. I love that. That's definitely a first. Ad tech as a suggestion for what should be innovated in women's health, because we can make all the damn amazing products, but if the customers can't find out about it because Facebook blocks all of our ads, like it's no good, right? So I love that.
And I know there's a lot of effort around Facebook, and they need to, get on board. But I think we need to innovate for our own problems, and Facebook was not built for us either. So build our own solutions at the same time.
Love it. And our last question is, what do you think the FemTech industry as a whole needs the most right now in order to be successful?
More coyotes. But I think like, within our own fund, we're, the better investors that we have in our fund as well. I think, I was thinking about your podcast with Carly, saying that limited partners are actually sort of the most conservative group, especially like right now we have great ones because they're individuals. But then as we continue to grow, we'll talk to institutions, and they tend to be very conservative, and not being open to new funds. And then, if they see that we invest in a sexual wellness deal, they might be like, oh my God, sex,
Yep. Yep.
So,
Or God forbid an abortion one.
yeah.
Yep.
So I think we need more specific kinds of capital.
Yes. Yeah. Where else can capital come from that isn't necessarily going to be censoring what GPs you and I can invest in based on their own personal beliefs? Yeah. Interesting. Well, Jess, do you have any last words for our listeners?
I don't think so. It's great to finally. I'm excited.
So excited. If someone is fundraising their FemTech company, how can they share it with Coyote Ventures?
Deals at coyote.ventures. You can subscribe to our newsletter at coyote.ventures. And of course, join FemTech Focus. The deals that we look at most closely are the ones that we've gotten to know through our virtual community, podcast, and events.
Yeah, that's the truth. That is the truth. Yeah, the people that are the most active are the ones that were like, yeah, it's obvious we want to invest in you. You're so present. You're so here. We're building this relationship. So I love it.
Especially before, like if they're sort of like at the idea stage, they get to know us, and then they're like, okay, we're launching my seed. If we already know them, we'll be like, we're first money in.
Yep, totally.
So we got to know you first.
Yep, that's right.
But we're not hard to reach. Just join the community.
Yeah, we're not hard to reach. Lots of VCs are so hard to reach. We're not. Yeah. No, you're right.
That's why, VC has traditionally been very selective, because they're just like, we need the warm intro, but you need to know someone to get the warm intro.
That's right. That's right. Let's break the system. Break it. It needs fixing. Jess, thanks so much for your time today. I am so excited to share the story of you, of us, of Coyote with my listener base here. I'm sure we are going to hear more from you and about you in our upcoming episodes.
Thank you. This is just the beginning.